Ron, just real briefly, you mentioned that you've done a little bit of voiceover, and we saw in your credits one acting appearance, live action on Harper Valley PTA. Did
Yeah.
you ever have any compunction to get in, or
I
any
tell you,
compulsion to get into acting?
over the years, I was asked repeatedly, and my agents always said that you don't want to do that. You're a writer. You start doing other things, people are going to say, you don't want him for a writer, he's not serious, you got to do only one thing, that's it. And this was the same mentality that for years was, if you write comedy, there can't be any tragedy in it. If you write drama, you can't be any humor in it. And that was sacrosanct. You could not violate that edict, as dumb as it was. This was the same era that a married couple could not have a single bed. They had to have twin beds. And if the husband was going to kiss his wife on a bed, he had to have 1 foot on the floor. Now, I'm no gymnast, but I know I can do a lot of shit with 1 foot on the floor. But obviously, these people, it wasn't in the Bible, and Jesus never did it, so they couldn't envision it. But it was insane. And you couldn't use the word pregnant.
That's right.
Nobody was pregnant.
Expecting.
Expecting or with child.
Yes. Tell us what's your writing process?
I sit down and I write. What it is all my life I've written, and all my life I've wanted to write. And I like the hand-eye coordination. I'm also a painter. I was an architect and a sculptor, and I've sold paintings and sculpture. And that hand and eye thing, if you have an idea and you feel that pen or that pencil and you write it, there's something about it that is age-old, and for me, just starts things rolling. And I will always begin whatever I write, writing, just doing the physical writing, because that connectivity means something. Same as with a brush or pencil. It's a physical act. And when you can physicalize an intellectual action, you bring energy to it. And it is a physical act for me. So my process is, I know how to do any kind of work in a disciplined manner in any environment. As an architect, I could go anywhere, measure up an as-built drawing and do the initial sketches and get them done in any time frame. I can write on a train or a plane or a bus. I could write here if I have to. I can write on the floor. I can write in bed. I can write at 2 in the morning. I can write it anytime. If I have to do it, I know how to do it. And I know how to get out of my own way. Because your conscious mind is the critic. And if you listen to your conscious mind, and when I began writing, I would do that. I'd start writing something, and my conscious mind, the little observer up here, would say, that's not for the ages. That's not good enough. William Shakespeare would vomit. Then I had to say, fuck Shakespeare. This is me. I can't worry about that. Just get it on paper. Get it on there. And keep as much of yourself flowing through that pencil or through the keyboard as you can without criticizing it. Just let it happen. And if you have anything, it'll show. It certainly is true in art and painting and drawing. It's also true in any art. You've got to get out of your own way. You've got to respect the process. And you've got to be able to turn it on demand, which is the discipline part.
You kept up with technology? Do you use a computer or a typewriter?
Okay. I use a computer. And I was reluctant. My first typewriter was my father's store typewriter, which was a 1926 Royal. And you knew you were writing when you worked on that, because every click, 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 it's Maxwell Perkins with Thomas Wolfe. It's Ernest Hemingway. It's everybody. You really hear click, 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 click. And when you saw it down there and some of the type fonts drilled holes in the paper, you knew I have done something. And I beat the hell out of typewriters. When I first got my first electric typewriter, which the William Morris Agency gave me when I signed with them to become a writer. And it bothered me because it hummed. And I would have it on and I heard something, schmuck, write something, asshole, you're an idiot. It really bothered me, but I got over it.
Do you ever have to deal with writer's block, and what do you do about it if you do?
I never do. And if I feel I'm on the edge of it, I will do the following. I sort of make a mental note of, I'll work this out, and then I'll walk away from it. I'll take a nap. I'll wait till the next day, and I'll let the unconscious and the subconscious mind deal with it. because they're much larger than the conscious mind. And this is really, studies have shown now where they can light up parts of the brain, that the way we deal with complex information is we allow the sorting out to be done by the subconscious and the unconscious. It's great for that. The conscious mind picks favorites or says you better do this now because the clock is ticking. Subconscious, unconscious doesn't. And I've always trusted it, and it's always come through.
So sometimes a good night's sleep will solve a problem that
It
you
will,
might be having.
as long as you create the expectation within yourself that you will solve the problem. I learned early to believe in Zen mountain climbing. Do you know the Zen approach to climbing a mountain?
Tell me.
You visualize yourself on the other side of the mountain. The climbing is purely incidental, coincidental. You find a way. Just the way great artists, and there are a number of them, can't draw, or they don't know anatomy, or they don't know, what the hell do you call it? They don't know perspective. But they solve the problem by other means. Honoré Rousseau. If you know Honoré Rousseau and have ever seen his paintings, The Sleeping Gypsy, you'll remember it forever because he was true to the image in his mind. He rendered that as faithfully as he could. The anatomy's not right, the perspective doesn't exist, but it doesn't matter because the communication is intense. So it's the same with writing.
Do you find that your process differs depending on what genre you're writing for, if it's variety or drama or a sitcom?
No, but I turn on different parts of me. If I'm going to be doing joke, that's a different mechanism. Then I've got to get into this Shecky Green rhythm or the Henny Youngman rhythm, which is like, I have mixed emotions. I saw my mother-in-law go over a cliff in my new Ferrari. Or my wife is a light eater. It gets light out, she starts to eat. Or a drunk puts a quarter in a meter and says, what do you know, I weigh an hour. Or Baby Mouse with Mama Mouse. Mama Mouse says, stay downstairs, I'm going out to get some cheese. Don't go upstairs, the cat's there. The minute Mama Mouse leaves, Baby Mouse runs up the stairs and the cat's waiting. Wah, wah. The cat's right in the Baby Mouse's face. Mama Mouse runs up the steps, gets between the Baby Mouse and the cat and goes, woof, 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 woof. And the cat runs away. And Mama Mouse says, now you know the value of a second language. 2, 3, 4. That's a joke. The band would have gotten it long ago. But that's a whole different rhythm, a whole different purpose.
So you put yourself in a different mindset.
I do.
Before you start writing.
Yeah, I can be that.
Yeah.
I can be the comic who is he talks about the feelings or emotions, you know, like Seinfeld. Did you ever see that last sock that's in the back of the dryer? It's like this, against the wall of the dryer. Why? What did it do?
When did you join the Writers Guild?
The minute Danny Kaye brought me to California. And I was in a half-assed fake writers group in New York, where I began. But the Writers Guild here was great because I worked with a lot of movers and shakers, the people that built the Writers Guild Union. And a lot of them were marvelous people, just terrific. And they had to really struggle to get the Hollywood bosses to allow them to form the union, just like the Actors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild. It was really a bloody war. And I was used to that growing up in Wharton, West Virginia, and then in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and seeing that the unions were absolutely the only source of strength that an individual could have against an enormous organization, an enormous industry. So I was with people like Nate Monester, and Carl Foreman became a great friend when he came back from England. Great writer, great friend. Frank Tarloff, Academy Award for Father Goose, and the guy that produced it never paid him. He won the Academy Award, and because he was in England, because of the blacklist, this guy never paid him. Frank got a judgment against the guy that if the guy ever returned to America, he could execute that judgment and make him pay. And he checked the obituaries and found when the guy's father died, he joined him at graveside with a lawyer and a cop. I loved that. Anyway, it was great. I enjoyed it then, and the business was collegial. Writers talked to writers, they had a good time together. And now the industry, which has always detested writers, which is why they created the term showrunner. What does a showrunner do? Lay carpet? What is a showrunner? a guy who runs and says, let me show you mine. Whoa, nobody knows. But they didn't want to say the old term, which was writer-producer. That gave the writer too much power. And the legendary guy who's a humanitarian award is given to him by the Motion Picture Association, given in his name.
Irving Thalberg.
Irving Thalberg is famously quoted as saying, writers must never learn how important they are, or they will not let us do our jobs. To which I have this response.
Not such a humanitarian when it came to
No, you
writing.
may quote me.
What do you think sort of are the benefits that have been bestowed upon writers for the existence of the
Well,
Guild?
I look at it this way. In my career as a writer, I've been on strike for almost a year and a half, collectively. When I began, there were no residuals for movies, motion pictures that appeared on television. None. There were no residuals, period. No such thing. Weren't going to pay residuals. A writer was not allowed to own his or her material. You give it away for no money or for $1. So you surrender the rights anytime you write for television. You weren't permitted on the set. No way. Not to be permitted on the set. You weren't invited to premieres. No way. There were no residuals for cable. In each case, what management said was this: we're not in that business. We're not in the business of showing movies on television. That is no business. It may become a business, but if you want some of the money that we get, you'll put us out of business. You'll destroy your opportunities. And that was true across the way. That's always their song. And yet, without us, the greatest director in the world sits in a camp chair with his thumb up his ass, saying, ah, the greatest actor in the world, when's lunch? There's nothing.
You have some very lucky students who have you as a teacher. What do you enjoy about teaching?
I enjoy teaching when students are open and eager and they're willing to work. And I've been around long enough and I'm old enough to know this: I can't guarantee the professional course of any student. Someone who appears to be a great student and does great work in class may not have the character or the balls or the courage or the adaptability or the durability to succeed in the industry, because it is a merciless industry. The Hollywood definition of a friend, somebody who stabs you in the face. It's accurate. And the thing is, writers, particularly in America, are honored only when they're a hit. It's like in Hollywood, it's what are you doing right now? So if you want an Academy Award, yeah, but what are you doing right now? Well, I'm not working. You're a bum. It used to be you win an Academy Award, you had 10 years of work. That was actors, that was writers, that was directors. Then, about 10 years ago, no, it's now maybe 5 to 7 years. Now, no estimate. No estimate. Europe, Asia, on the other hand, age is revered, particularly accomplishment. But they're getting into the Hollywood mode too, which is, I want it now, it has to be fast, can't be too deep, it's got to just cut quickly, go to them, get that, get them on Yahoo, get them on this, get them on that. But how we live as human beings and what's important is what's transcendental, what isn't stylish, but that which endures because of its basic truth, its basic value. As what? As entertainment, as inspiration, as diversion. The opening sentence in the book of Buddha is something I admire. The opening sentence is, life is difficult. It's not your fault. You weren't conceived in sin. It's rough out there. Remember that. So knowing that, whoever can provide some mystery, some entertainment, some laughter, some diversion, you're doing important work. It makes life bearable. And I know my life became what it was because of radio, because of movies, because of television, because of reading Charles Dickens and reading Jules Verne and reading and reading and reading. That's what we need, because whatever's on television, whatever's in the movies, whatever is read, whatever is written, it's what Shakespeare did for the English language. In it, he told us who we were as human beings. First time in the history of the world anyone did that. And it's indelible. because we haven't changed. We are still driven by lust and hunger and need and want and ambition and fear, always. So I don't care what new format is there, what you can access via whatever implement, whatever screen, it's still the same story, because we're still the same story, and it needs to be retold. So I take pride in having done that, although I would much rather have had one big smash and everybody would know that. But
well, again, your students are lucky, and you've partially answered the first of my few summing up questions, which is how do you think the television industry has changed since you started? Do you have anything you want to add to that on how things are different
well,
now?
television has changed, and not necessarily for the good, but all change has elements of good and bad in it. Initially, television was controlled by the advertising agencies. The advertising agencies created the programming. The networks were obligated to show it. The networks were pissed off because they didn't control the material that they were showing. Of course, the FCC licensing really spells out that they are not supposed to control it, because that's a monopolistic practice and it's a restriction of trade. And yet that's what they always wanted. Well, when Kennedy became president, he brought in a guy named Newton Minow to be the head of the Federal Communications Commission, and he's famous for saying television is a vast wasteland. The networks immediately said it's a vast wasteland because these people pushing pimple cream and Preparation H, they don't give a shit about quality. We do. We will control the product now. In other words, control not only the means of distribution, but the making of the products that are distributed. Again, that's antitrust. You can't do that. There are laws preventing that. But that's what they were waiting for, and they immediately became owners of shows. Now nobody puts a show on that the network doesn't own or own a significant part of. Has the network's participation improved television? Hell no. It was much better when the ad agencies did because it was more current. The response to human circumstances was more immediate. There are a bunch of shows on now thanks to Norman Lear, who broke ground at great cost initially. Now you can have a show like Mom. You can have shows that deal with abortion. You can have shows that deal with fornication and bastardry. You can have shows that deal with different color problems and all the rest of it. But they still are not the bulk of the entertainment. And how many shows are educational? And yet the FCC license demands that every network that uses that public airway for free do this: show the political conventions, provide political advertising. They're not doing that. They haven't done it for years. Somebody with some guts ought to grab the FCC and hold the fucking networks to fulfill their obligation under the terms that they're allowed to use the public airways. That will not imprison the business on the internet, which is still wide open territory and should remain such. But anybody who wants to make a quick buck can find a quick platform on which to do it. So this plethora of unreality reality television is now there, and you get a lot of mindless yo-yos who will buy a reality star as a serious candidate for President of the United States. This is insane, and I know what his appointments will be. Absolutely. Somebody said Rudy Giuliani as head of the FBI, and I said no. It has to be the guy who runs NCIS because he looks right. Who will be Chief Justice after Kim Kardashian? I think I said it earlier here that you need a robe on somebody like that because each cheek of her ass is in a different zip code.
I do recall that.
Anyway, I love the potential for television. I love the potential for the internet. And right now it is no man's land, luckily, because the consolidators who now want to put together another huge consortium of major players, all that does is stifle the voices of dissent. And we have had too many voices stifled. And there are not platforms in which you can actually examine a candidate's position in depth, except on PBS.
You have children that are writers, correct?
My oldest son and my daughter are both writers. They won an award for writers, but neither one of them are writers as a career.
What advice have you given them, if any, about their writing?
Well, I told them it was great, and if they want to pursue it, I would bless that. But I also said, do something that you love. You'll find a way to find happiness in your life if you do that. But if you're going to do that, be adaptable, because you may not get that exact corner of what you love. You may get a different arena, but you'll still be doing what you love. So only my youngest son has entered the business, and he is a producer, a line producer, who's really gifted. Still waiting for the right break, but he's one of the most brilliant people in production that I know, and I know a lot about that because I was a professional scene designer, and I know what it's all about. So my oldest son is a lawyer, a tax lawyer, who came out of Yale Law and was headhunted by all the prestigious firms on Wall Street, signed with the one that gave him the most money, and it was a hell of a lot of money, and then had no life because his billable hours, which they were charging $1,500 or $1,200 for, they were paying him $300 to $400. He still made a lot of money, but he never left the office. And when he was one of the point men on the R.J. Reynolds-Nabisco merger and never slept in his own place, he was always on a plane or in a conference meeting in some different city. He said, that's it, I'm just making rich bad guys richer by creating debt. So he tried to be a writer in Canada with his French-Canadian girlfriend for a couple of years. He got some options, he sold a couple things to magazines. Then he said, this is no living, and he's now a tax lawyer in Washington. My daughter, brilliant writer, won awards for it. She got a degree, master's degree in business from Yale, like his law degree from Yale, and she became a vice president of Pfizer. And then she was headhunted by the Raoul Wallenberg Family Foundation, the richest family in Sweden, to invest in HMOs and medical devices. She's semi-retired from that. She's writing now. And my other son makes movies. But
Sounds
they're
like
great
everyone's
kids.
doing pretty good.
They are. They're great kids. They're happily married. I'm happy.
What is your proudest career achievement?
I think it's really the aggregate capability of being able to make a fine living writing things that I often felt were a cut above the usual and often really good, and being acknowledged as a person of a writer of quality by other writers of quality and actors of quality and directors of quality. It's being regaled by your peers that you respect. I really value that. And I also am still doing it. And as always, still hoping that some of the things I'm working on now will go a greater distance. Unfortunately, if you're a writer or you're an artist, you're always in this position. It's always, do you like the turkey I made for Thanksgiving, Daddy? And Daddy may say, fuck off, or, yeah, that's not bad. Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. But the fact that you still have to do it, that's the game.
Any career regrets?
No. I don't believe in regrets. So I think I mentioned my mother, who was a brilliant pianist and a brilliant singer, always regretted that she didn't move forward in either one of those. She was offered a 7-year contract at Paramount by Adolf Zucker, whom I met on the Paramount lot when he was 100 or something. And I asked him about the show that my mother was in Philadelphia in 1926. It's called The Miracle, by the legendary European producer whose name suddenly escaped me. God, senior senile moment, Max Reinhardt, legend of the theater of opera. It was called The Miracle, based on the medieval legend, The Juggler of Our Lady, which is the story of people coming to pray before the statue of the Virgin. And the poor juggler's son is dying of an unknown illness. And he has no gold, no jewels, nothing to give to the statue of the Virgin. But he juggles for her, and she comes to life.
Hang on one sec.
That's the Virgin coming for us now. And if she's a virgin in this area, she's got about 12 seconds before she gets banged.
It's a big problem.
That's it.
I'm sorry, Ryan.
Anyway, so she didn't do any of these things, but Adolf Zucker remembered her. She was the queen of the peasants at the age of 19, in 1926, Philadelphia. the leading man who played the shepherd, who was the leader of all the supplicants that came, was played by an actor named Fritz Feld. If you've seen movies from the 70s, 80s, 60s, 50s, Fritz Feld always played waiters who did this. Oh yes, I have your champagne. That was Fritz Feld. But in those days, he was a handsome leading man. And my mother had a portrait of him drawn by Lady Diana Manners' mother. Lady Diana Manners, British superstar. Her mother was in the Royal Academy and made a picture of him that he gave to my mother, to my beautiful Queen of the Peasants. My brother and I always said, he banged Mom. We're his kids, because we keep hearing Fritz Feld, Fritz Feld. Anyway, years later, and I mean years later, at Carl Foreman's house, there was a party, and who's there but Fritz Feld? His wife was Virginia Christine, who played Mrs. Olson in the coffee commercials for years. And I went over to Fritz and I said, Fritz Feld. He says, yeah? I said, Philadelphia, 1926, The Miracle. He says, my God, you look fantastic. I said, I wasn't there, Fritz. My mother was in the show. Ah, he says, I banged them all. Behind the altar in Act 2. I banged them all. I said, I guess that means I'm your bastard. He says, yeah, there's a resemblance. Virginia, meet my bastard son. The realization of a dream to meet your dad. And he wasn't, but...
Well then, other than our final question, other than Mr. Feld's son, how would you like to be remembered?
Well, I hope I'll be remembered as a good guy who cared, and that I gave hope and the tools of implementing that hope to generations of kids who wanted to write or wanted to be in the business. That I opened doors for them as people, not just as writers or directors, and that I meant it when I said, stay in touch, I'll help you if I can. And I think that's good enough for me, but when I think of epitaphs, I always think of the ones for John Singer Sargent, great painter. His epitaph is, the mouth isn't quite right. And Rodney Dangerfield's epitaph is, there goes the neighborhood. And Merv Griffin's is, I won't be right back. So.
Perfect. Ron, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. It's been educational and entertaining.
Thank you, John.
You've really added to our archive. We really appreciate it.
Well, I hope it's seen by people who will buy my book and produce my play and help me make a living, because I still am determined to succeed at some long-held dreams and ambitions. And if I don't, I will literally die trying.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thanks, John. Thanks to the Guild. Glad to be memorialized on whatever it'll be.
Great.